What's going on, ladies and gents? This is Just the Worst AMA podcast, episode number 4 to be perfectly precise. I'm your host, Billy Donnelly, as usual, who you can find at JoeBlow.com. This is Infamous, and right here at Just the Worst podcast. And as every show is, I allow you to ask me anything. Ask me anything you want. Hit me with your best inquiry, and I'll do my best to hit you with my most honest, most truthful, most opinionated answer. The rules are very simple. Ask me whatever you want. About movies, video games, wrestling, life, love. I don't care. You just put it out there, and I'll give you a good answer. And with that said, we'll get started with the show. Got 3 questions on the docket for this particular week, including one thing that I'm going to bring up as far as just answering the question that we get all the time, which is what's the deal with This Is Infamous. So I guess we could start with that right out of the gate, sort of let you know what's going on with This Is Infamous. This Is Infamous, of course, the website that we crowdfunded and launched following my dismissal from Ain't It Cool News, which is about 2.5 years ago, maybe 3. I think it's 3 years ago, actually, that it happened. This Is Infamous later this summer, early on, I think in June, that would be the 3-year anniversary of the launch of that. So, following my dismissal from Ain't It Cool News, we raised $5,000 in money on Indiegogo in order to set up operational costs for This Is Infamous and launch our own thing. And a lot of people who were unhappy with how I left Ain't It Cool or how I was treated on the way out the door really did a lot for me as far as contributing money and getting us off the ground. I can never be thankful enough or appreciative enough for the people who gave us any level of contribution to get the site off the ground, whether it's $5 or $10 or $20 or $50, whatever it is that you gave us to get started. That one always will hit me right in the bottom of my heart. I will always have a special place for you guys and girls who believed in us to try and do something new, try to do something different, and to give a platform to our voice. So the idea moving forward with the site was to just launch something different, not sort of play by any of the rules, and to just kind of go at it. Lots of original content with sort of a wide spectrum of what we were trying to cover, which now seems to be what everybody wants to do, is sort of cover everything. But we had people who were passionate about those things, whether they were movies or television or video games or comic books or tabletop games or wrestling or toys and collectibles, whatever it was. We had a lot of people that we could get involved in the process in those areas. And that was always sort of my mission with This Is Infamous moving forward, was to get people in there who loved what they loved and wanted, who loved what they loved and wanted to have an outlet to sort of talk about it. And so when we call for contributors in the very beginning, I never expected to have as many people as we did come on board, really gung-ho about this opportunity. But we did. We had a lot of people who wanted to do it, but they weren't up to the standard that we wanted to sort of set forth for excellence moving forward. And we thanked them for their contribution and thanked them for taking a shot at it. But there were a lot of people that were just into it, and they seemed like a good fit. And we said, well, let's give it a shot. Let's see if we can make it work. And over time, a handful of people just sort of tailed off, but a lot of people were really into it for a long period of time. And there are people who are still into it, who we still consider part of our active roster. But the problem that we ran with This Is Infamous is because we were still a brand new site and we were operating off of crowdfunding, we weren't at the capacity to be able to pay people for their work right out of the get-go. We were more a passion project. Even myself, I wasn't a paid for a long period of time. Still, I don't think I've ever seen a dime from This Is Infamous, more just money that was either invested or money that we made that was reinvested in order to keep it going, which I think is a misconception that people have about some of these sites and blogs that we're doing all right, we're making bank. We're not. In a lot of ways, we're not. There are different things that allow me to sort of stay afloat. But as far as money coming in from This Is Infamous, that wasn't really something that was helping me get my bills paid. And, and a lot of other people had the same thing. They loved writing about what they did. They did it in their spare time. Some people had a lot of time on their hands for whatever reasons. And as a result, they were able to write when they could, as best as they could, in order to contribute to the content of This Is Infamous. Once again, they had a love for it. They had a passion for it. They were into everything that we were trying to do, and it excited them. So over time, what winds up happening, though, is just the fact that sometimes people have to do other things in order to make their own ends meet. So whether it was people who had to go out and look for a better paying job, or who needed to put more time in at their job, or who just sort of needed time to themselves, who needed time to decompress from their regular life, or who needed to put more time into their regular life, who needed to be able to spend more time with their family, as opposed to writing about the latest trailer, as we moved into more and more content to kind of deal with the growth of the site and sort of the demand that we needed to keep up with in order to keep the site moving forward, as opposed to remaining sort of stagnant to meet the demand for traffic. So what wound up happening with This Is Infamous, as it was previously constituted, was we just sort of ran out of people. We ran out of people who were able to devote the amount of time or work to be able to do it. And we started to tail off, and there were only a handful of people left in order to sort of keep the train rolling, myself included. And look, I took a job with JoBlo.com because I needed some of that money to come in, and I needed to continue to fill my passion for movies, to talk about movies, to write about movies. And they afforded me that opportunity. And as a result, I stepped back from This Is Infamous and the stressfulness that comes from running a website 24/7 in order to move on to something where I worked for somebody else. I was able to write. I had a shift. I was able to cover certain things, and then I can go on with the rest of my day. I could spend more time with my family. I could sit down for dinner with my family. At 11:30 at night, I wasn't worrying about breaking news or the latest trailer that was hitting. I was able to move on to do a podcast like this, to sort of spread my wings a little bit creatively and focus on some of the things that I love to be able to do, but wasn't being able to do because of the stressfulness that kept increasing with This Is Infamous, and sort of shouldering more of the burden as we continue to lose more people moving forward. So I know This Is Infamous has sort of sat dormant for a while. We've been sitting with it, trying to figure out what we wanted to do. People have come and approached us about maybe being able to take it over, which was an idea that we toyed with for a little bit of time, except there was no benefit for me to just give it to somebody, knowing all the time and effort and work that we had put in. Somebody wanted to come forth and purchase it for a reasonable price. I may have sold it over to somebody, but just handing it over, that wasn't really a part of the plans. And I didn't really want to shut it down entirely and sort of get rid of all the work that and blood and sweat and time and effort that had been put into the site. So the idea we had recently hatched was to sort of just retool and retweak the site, that we were going to resurrect This Is Infamous, just in a different way. So we tried to figure out a way to do it where we could sort of just archive everything that was in the past, everything that had been done back in over the course of time since our launch, And as much as we tried to make it work, the site was just too big. We'd been at it for so long. There had been so much content in it over the course of the years that the site was just too large for us to move forward with that. So as a result, from this day forward, moving forth, all of the previous content that had been up on This Is Infamous has now is now gone. It's been tossed out to the abyss of the internet. Now that doesn't mean it's gone forever. Our plan is, we have archived all of the work. We will be dispersing it to all of our previous staff, and they can do whatever it is that they want with it, so that they have it. It's not lost forever. My own work at some point will resurface again on the internet, and anything old that you want to maybe look for or read, whether it's a review or a column or a piece of news from the past, you'll be able to track that down and be able to find it. But at this point, moving forward with This Is Infamous, we're going to sort of retool. So This Is Infamous is in the process of being retweaked. We will be moving forward with primarily digital content. So what we had previously planned to launch as a separate entity with Just the Worst Podcast, that will now be swallowed up into the overall brand and dynamic of This Is Infamous. So you'll be able to find all of our podcasts from Just the Worst Podcast, whether it's Just the Worst Podcast, Just the Worst AMA Podcast, Just the Worst Wrestling Podcast, Just the Worst Movie Review Podcast. All of those in the future you'll be able to find at This Is Infamous as they continue to come out. The Cinephiles will also continue to be a part of This Is Infamous with their podcasts appearing as part of the site. They're still there, so you'll be able to find those moving forward. In addition, all of our future content will be of a digital nature. So what we'll be doing there is we'll be adding more video content. So the video reviews that you've continued to see go up on the This Is Infamous YouTube channel, as well as on our social media pages, they will be now housed at thisisinfamous.com, as well as any other videos that may come up. So videos from the past, any interviews that we get, those from the past will be up there, as well as future interviews, as well as the movie review packages. That's how we're going to continue to move forward. So not a lot of writing that you'll really find going up on the site. It'll be a lot of digital media going up. So whether it's a podcast or a video, that's what you'll be able to see moving forward at This Is Infamous. They'll come up as frequently as we can get them up. That doesn't mean you'll see brand new content coming up, flying forth at such a furious pace as we had in the past. But you will get a pretty good amount coming forth in the future as best as we can do it. So that's the future of This Is Infamous. We're working very diligently to get things back up and running as soon as we possibly can. I don't have a specific date for you other than to say that sooner rather than later. We're hoping to get it up in a matter of days or weeks, not necessarily months. So as quickly as we can get that stuff together and launched is as quickly as I will be able to announce and let you know when we pull the trigger on it, and as quickly as you'll be able to go out and enjoy the future content of This Is Infamous, returning to your regularly scheduled visits of the site. So that's sort of the big question that I can answer for you as far as what is going on with This Is Infamous. We are resurrecting it. We are bringing it back. It will be much, much, much different moving forward, and we hope that you stick with us. We hope that you enjoy it. We can hope that you continue to support all the work that we put into it. Let's get into some of your questions, some of the other questions, some of the more specific questions that have been laid upon me for this particular week. And we'll jump right into those right now with Javier Sanchez kicking things off. And he wants to know, what's your take on 4K TVs? There doesn't seem to be any content in 4K. Is there a 4K Blu-ray replacement in the works that I'm not aware of? Well, here's the deal with 4K TVs, is that right now there's just not enough content out there to sort of justify their very existence. You have to remember that the way that television and sort of the media that goes with high definition has tried to continue to progress as we've continued to go, because otherwise there's no need for you to continue to buy. If you just bought an HD TV and that's where they stopped, what would that do for TV companies or electronics companies moving forward? They need a product to be able to sell you, and they got to look for the next thing. And the thing with 4K TVs right now is that they're really expensive. And as a result, it is very difficult for content providers to start to invest money into creating 4K content when there's not an audience out there that can consume it. At that point, you're sort of just throwing money away. So there's sort of a catch-22 situation going on, which is that 4K TVs need 4K content in order to sort of break through to people who are buying either content or TVs. But the content providers don't want to invest money into that unless there's an audience that's going to consume the 4K media. So it's sort of a stalemate as far as like who goes first. And with 4K TVs being really expensive, and the fact that now you can get an HD TV out there, smart TV, for a really relatively affordable price, 4K TVs aren't exactly the jumping off point right now that people want to go and hit. They want to look at it and go, well, let me just see, because I just bought this one and it's doing me just fine. And it's not going to break my bank. On top of that, you got to remember how people now consume their media and their content. Physical media isn't really a thing. So 4K Blu-rays aren't really a thing because people aren't really buying Blu-rays. Blu-ray sales continue to be down. People are consuming their media digitally. So they're buying them off of Amazon Prime, or they're buying them off of Apple TV, because they don't have to store all those Blu-ray or DVD cases in their house. They have it all within their drive. So they're consuming that. They're watching Netflix or Hulu. They're consuming things that way as well. So as a result, until those formats once again start to catch up with 4K TVs and sort of feed into providing content for that, once again, 4K TVs are a difficult thing. Now, I mean, just think back a number of years when HD TVs first hit on. High definition was the first thing. And granted, there was a little bit more speed to the progress in order to make a lot of that happen. But with that being said, it took a while for a lot of people to get an HD TV until the price started to be a little bit more manageable. So there's not really a 4K Blu-ray replacement in the works. 4K Blu-ray is just sort of there. Now, granted, the picture looks amazing, and well, from there we'll move on to 6K, much in the way that even when it comes to the surround sound, 5.1 digital surround sound wasn't enough. Now we're at the level of 7.1, but once again, now you're talking about adding 2 extra speakers and sort of coding it out so that it fits the format that people have, and if they don't have it, what good is it? So really, we're in a situation now where there's not a replacement, and we're kind of just at a stalemate. And until more and more content keeps coming out in order to fill a demand that's not yet there, I don't know where we're headed. I do know that at some point we'll get to 4K. At some point 4K will be the norm, but it's going to take a lot of investment around everybody, whether it's the studios or the content providers or directors or whoever, as well as the TV providers, the TV manufacturers, electronics companies, to get it all together, to find a common ground for them to move forward, for that to sort of now be the standard as opposed to the exception. So with that said, my take on 4K TVs, they look fantastic. The picture looks fantastic. There's not enough content to justify buying one. I don't have one, and that's kind of it. So we'll see when we get caught up, but I don't really see it being within the next 2 to 3 years, maybe a little bit longer than that. All right, let's jump over to Brian McNatt's question this week. Brian McNatt has sent in a question dealing with the overall, I believe, the Star Wars universe. So Brian McNatt's question is, Disney has so many Marvel and Star Wars movies planned, it seems like fatigue is inevitable, assuming it isn't already started. Considering the scope of both the Marvel and Star Wars universes, what are some strange or unique genres you'd like to see them take on in the name of holding off that fatigue? A Western-style superhero movie, a Star Wars horror film? Could such things ever even happen? Let's see. Look, I don't know that fatigue is setting in for these particular things. I think at one point in time there was a superhero / comic book fatigue, and that started to happen really as following the original Spider-Man, when all of a sudden people said, "Oh shit, look at that. People really like these properties," and they started buying them up and making all sorts of comic book films that weren't very good. Now, granted, there were plenty that were, but you also have to remember there were films like the original Daredevil or Elektra or Catwoman, Jonah Hex along the way. A lot of films that didn't really do the comic book properties justice. The original Judge Dredd. These are all films that started they just started buying them up. The Punisher films, there's Ghost Rider. I can name them. I can rattle them off as they continue to sort of seep into my head. So I think at that point people started to get fatigued a little bit. I think then they started to turn it around some. Mostly dealing with sort of the Nolan Batman films. I think that's where they really started to hit their stride, where people once again said, "Hey, what's going on here?" So they had the Batman films, and then also sort of the launch of the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Iron Man. And now you have to remember, it's not Star Wars. I mean, it's not comic book or superhero films run rampant, really. It's certain brands that are doing it. So while you don't have these sort of singular things all over the place, the connective universes, whether they're over with what Warner Brothers is doing for DC, or what Marvel Studios is doing within Disney, or even what 20th Century Fox is trying to do with the X-Men and now Deadpool, and who knows, we'll see how the Fantastic Four may be salvaged over there. But it's not really fatigue because it's an overall brand. It's a connective tissue within the shared universe that continues to draw people to see it. People, by and large, are sort of completionists. We see these things happening and we say to ourselves, "Oh man, I can't miss out on the next thing because what I already have come this far." And even though these things are never going to end, it's the same sort of thing that attracts comic book readers. They continue to read the storylines as they continue going forward, with the exception being that here these things don't end. They don't stop when it comes to the films. They're going to just keep on going as long as they possibly can. And the only reason they're going to stop is if they make bad ones. If they make bad ones consecutively, several bad ones in a row, that's where people will start to check out. I think you saw that with Man of Steel, where people looked at it and they go, "I don't know about this." So we'll see what happens moving forward with DC. The X-Men films for a while, it sort of stalled out with X-Men Last Stand and X-Men Origins Wolverine before they were able to sort of pull it back. So I don't know that there's fatigue there. Same thing with Star Wars. I think there's a lot of excitement around Star Wars because, once again, it feels fresh and new. And as long as they continue to churn out good films, people aren't going to turn a blind eye to them. They're not going to say, "Well, I'm done with Star Wars." If Star Wars can keep going after the prequels are concerned, they're going to keep going as long as they make something that is exciting and entertaining and fun and gets people jazzed to go out to the theater. With Star Wars, look, Marvel can do certain things. They have a certain formula that they're trying to sort of commit to in order to keep this cinematic universe going forward and feel like it's all together. They have been able to do some things, stretching their legs a little bit in the past year or so, whether it was Guardians of the Galaxy or Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which is very much sort of like a 70s spy film. Doctor Strange is going to start to get very mystical and weird. So there are a number of things that they can do by using different sorts of genres within the Marvel films. It's really just going to be a matter of how they are able to do them within those particular characters. So I don't want to see them sort of force things into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'd like it to be sort of a more organic melding of two things, where you can sort of make a film with this character that fits into a slapstick comedy, or a Western, I guess, if you wanted to do something. But although a Western style superhero movie, I think we're going to see that with Suicide Squad later this year. Star Wars, I think, with Rogue One is going to be sort of this like a heist movie. So there are different sorts of genres I think we're already starting to see. I think a horror movie might. I don't know if we're going to get a horror movie. I would like to see just like a buddy comedy, maybe in the Star Wars universe. I think that might be sort of cool. A slapstick comedy, maybe even a romantic comedy, just for shits and gigs. So I think there are a number of different ways, a number of different things they could explore, particularly Star Wars. I think Star Wars gives them a little bit more leeway to do things moving forward as they are building this universe. The thing with the Marvel is that they are more committed to what's been done sort of in the books previously, or remaining committed to sort of the characters' histories, whereas Star Wars, they just have an open road ahead. They are moving forward with Star Wars canon that's never been examined before, so they can do a lot of different things with Star Wars, and I do think we will see some more of that stuff moving forward. It's just a matter of how creative they're going to start to get, because, let's remember, as money rolls in, these big studios with these big properties start to get a little bit tighter, play it a little bit closer to the vest. And I hope with Star Wars they manage to keep it a little bit more wide open, because that's what's going to keep them exciting and fresh. So thank you, Brian, for that question. One final question here. This one comes from Stefan De Solo, who wants to ask, who is my favorite director and why? That's not really a tough one. I think it would really come down to sort of two filmmakers who I always sort of support and gravitate towards. One is a pretty easy one that I think is sort of the standard for a lot of people, and that'd be Steven Spielberg. Sort of growing up as a kid in the 80s, Steven Spielberg's films just spoke to you, connected with you. He had a sort of an understanding of stories revolving around kids in a number of ways, and also just sort of allowing you to lose yourself in the fantastical, even when the fantastical was grounded. They were just exciting, adventurous stories that you can lose yourself in, whether it's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, or Jaws, or Raiders of the Lost Ark, or E.T. You just look at those films and go, wow. Those are some tremendous all-time greats that are up there. And as you continue to move through, I mean, Jurassic Park, or Saving Private Ryan, or Schindler's List, I mean, these are amazing films that other filmmakers would be lucky and begging to have one of those films ever happen to them over the course of their career. And Spielberg has staked his career on making them consistently. So, look, it's pretty amazing. And Spielberg just is able to sort of tap into that, just this something inside of you that wants to just go along for the ride, wants to go along for the journey and see something that you've never seen before, or feel something you never felt before. Go along on these adventures safely that his films enable you to do. So Spielberg is definitely one that's up there, one of the all-time great storytellers in the history of cinema. So how he can't be up there as one of your favorite directors, that to me is sort of tough over time. I think he's got to be in the conversation, and for me, he's one of my favorite directors. My other favorite, who I'd add into the conversation, and that's just because, once again, he does something that nobody else sort of does, or let's put it this way, does things that people before him have done, but puts his own unique spin on it, and that'd be Quentin Tarantino. Quentin Tarantino to this point has done 8 films to his resume, and you can't look at one and say that's a bad one. There are no bad films in Quentin Tarantino's filmography. Even the ones that you may look at and say they're lesser, which usually starts with Death Proof. Although that film gets a bad rap, if you watch that film now, sort of by itself, you'll really be amazed by what he was able to do with that film. But you look at the films of Tarantino, and it seems like every day you can look at it and not have the same favorite. amongst his films. You could look at his films and go, well, this time it's this one, or this time it's that one, or this time it's this one. It could change with the day, with the wind, as far as what your favorite Tarantino film is. And I think he has these incredibly rich characters, tells stories incredibly well. The dialogue is amazing to just sit and listen to. And I love watching a Tarantino film. I know I'm going to get something that challenges me, that doesn't sort of dumb itself down to me. And whether it's sort of a crime noir film, or a drug movie, or a Western, or a Southern, as he likes to call them, or sort of a World War II movie, I know that I'm usually going to get my money's worth out of a Tarantino film. It's going to be something that I'm going to continue to watch in the future because of how great it is. And for that reason, I also put Tarantino up there. Between Spielberg and Tarantino, those are my two sort of go-to filmmakers that I know I could watch something that they make, and I'm gonna find something incredibly good for it. Sort of movies for the soul, and that's why those two would rank right up there as my favorite directors. That's all the questions that I have for this week's show. So I want to thank everybody for submitting them. If you want to submit them in the future, by all means, you can submit them on Facebook, on our threads. You could tweet them at me as well. I'll give you all that information right now. So be sure to hit all of our social media platforms, I guess. Over on Twitter, you can follow us at JTW Podcast. That's the official podcast handle of Just the Worst Podcast. Also, now that we're a part of it again, at Tis Infamous. That's the This Is Infamous Twitter handle. So make sure you follow that as well for all information. We'll be sure to tweet about our relaunch there as well. So at TIS Infamous. And you can follow me for all of my just randomness, my stream of consciousness, my just complete whatever is in my mind, I put out there on Twitter, at Infamous Kid. Follow that as well. Facebook, over at Facebook.com/JustTheWorstPodcast, Facebook.com/TisInfamous, and Facebook.com/BillyTheKid. SoundCloud.com, that's where all the podcasts can be found. SoundCloud.com. You can find them all there at SoundCloud.com/JustTheWorstPodcast. And you'll be able to grab them there all the time. Moving forward, ThisIsInfamous.com, you'll be able to grab them there as well. And we'll be sure to have all the RSS feeds, the Stitcher, iTunes, all those will be lined up as we get This Is Infamous back online. So SoundCloud.com/JustTheWorstPodcast. In the meantime, that's the most reliable way to get all of your podcasts. Find me on a regular basis at JoeBlow.com. This is Infamous, and of course, Just the Worst Podcast over on SoundCloud. I have been Billy Donnelly. This has been Just the Worst AMA Podcast, episode number 4. I'll see you next week, so have yourself a pleasant immediate future. I'm out for now. Keep those questions coming. Peace. Just the Worst AMA Podcast, episode number 4, has been a presentation of Just the Worst Podcast Media.